Welcome to Culture is an Inside Job, the podcast on building an authentic, engaging, and inspiring culture. Hi, I'm Wendy Roop, and along with my friends and co-hosts Karen Preston and Scott McGowan, we believe that building a healthy work culture starts with leaders like you. If you're ready to get real and dig deep into your own self-awareness, determine how you want to show up in the world, and then take aligned action to transform your leadership and those around you, then this podcast is for you. Now, let's go inside. Welcome back to Culture is an Inside Job. How you doing, Karen and Scott?
Great.
Good on this end.
Good. Been spending a little bit of time catching up before we hit record, and we're happy Taylor's with us, of course, because he keeps us going and helping us with all of our technology. So thank you, Taylor. So last time we were together, we jumped in and we're talking about our saboteurs. And please go to episode 10 and listen to that for all the details, because we did talk about a lot of things. So we're not going to repeat all of that and all about positive intelligence and so forth, but that information is there. So when we were together, we dove into avoider, the saboteurs we call out as, well, first of all, judge, right? Like that's the overarching saboteur, and then all of its accomplices, and the ones that we had the opportunity to dive into, explain a little bit, and then also share from our perspective how they show up in our lives. We talked about avoider, controller, and hyperachiever. And so today, and the other thing I want to mention is when we, at the end of that episode with all of you, we also just ask you to observe really yourselves, right? How are these, if any of them, or how are they showing up for you? And then I know Karen brought this up, and this is something I say all the time, but I don't think you can repeat it enough. The importance of giving ourselves space and grace as we're discovering those things. It's not about beating ourselves up. It's not about being wrong. It's about, gosh, what's the impact that it can make when we have that deeper level of self-awareness about when they are showing up. And then later on, we'll determine what do we do about it. But just the self-awareness in itself is huge, a huge first step. And so sometimes we have to sit in a little bit more. I know Karen talked about that last time. Sometimes we have to sit in it a little bit more before we can then determine how do we quiet them more. So before we jump in, Scott, Karen, anything that you would like to add?
I think what's interesting, and you guys are the experts in this area, and I'm not, but my gut says, like a lot of assessments you take, some of them, they almost set the stage that says you're baked at 19. So the first time you take them, they're not going to change. Does that make sense every time? And my gut says, looking at this, that potentially this could change over time with increased self-awareness. And am I right?
Yeah, Karen, go ahead. Yeah. I have my thoughts, but answer, and then I'll jump in if I need to.
So I would say absolutely. I would agree, and I probably could be a testimonial to that with my own experience after having done the saboteur assessment the first time. And really understanding that level of humility in it, and how, wow, I had no idea, the awareness can now be there to understand, well, what would it look like if I were to quiet these? And so ironically, we'll talk a little bit more about this as we move along, but my controller was my third highest, and my pleaser was kind of low. And really, since doing this work, as well, collaborating more with Wendy and recognizing the pleaser more so in those around me, I have leveled out my controller and my pleaser is higher. And so it doesn't mean that I'm full in pleaser, but I'm just much more aware of the pleasing mindset and how collaboration is important. And that I need to be more considerate rather than controlling, if that makes sense. So yes, I do believe they can change over time, and Shirzad encourages us to take them as often as. I even have some of my clients saying, I want to take this from a personal perspective as opposed to a professional perspective, because they do believe there may be some differences. And as a coach, that's really important to coach that gap, right?
Well, I say that because, like, in my own life, I don't know, when my butt kind of fell off like 14 years ago, I was the
You lost
mayor
your butt?
I did. I
Wow.
lost my butt.
Wait, I thought we were
Fell off.
talking about a button, but then I
Yeah.
realized really,
I did.
Yeah,
we-
I lost my butt. It fell off. But I was like the mayor of victimhood.
Yeah.
And I hated conflict. Right. And so I bet if I took this like 14 years ago, like victim would have been number one. It would have been a trophy.
Yeah.
And then avoider would have been really close. And now it's kind of slipped to the bottom. So thanks for clarifying that.
Yeah,
Because sometimes when I take these things, I'm like, well, like I just came out of the oven and I'm baked and there's nothing I can do about it. But apparently,
No.
based on your feedback, I have done something about it.
Mhm.
And then we get to talk about the shenanigans that are going on today.
Yep.
Yeah.
Perfect.
And I'm
Completely
so
fine.
glad that you brought that up, Scott, because, and I agree with everything Karen said. I do believe, and last time we talked about this, right? Like these saboteurs all come from someplace from childhood. And so I do think before we have that level of self-awareness around where they came from, you know, whatever those saboteurs were are going to pop to the top. And to your point, Scott, if you hadn't had that level of self-awareness and done the quote unquote work, as I like to call it, you know, over the years, which you have, that victim would still be probably the loudest. But because you've chosen to do that and had the level of self-awareness and then done the work around it, it's quieted and allows some others, you know, that are coming to the top. And then that's kind of that cycle that can happen. So yes,
Can I tell you a
Great
great victim story?
please.
So when I was a kid, I have a twin brother, and it was Christmas time. And my sister and my brother got a bunch of toys. Well, I counted them, and they got more toys than I did. And I walked in my parents' bedroom, and I was like, hey, Mom, Dad, I want to know why Todd and Stephanie got more toys than I did. What a victim, right? So my dad says, my mom's name is Jackie. Goes, Jackie, do you want to tell him or should I?
Can't wait
My
to hear
mom's
this.
like, tell him what? She goes, well, son, today's the day. You get to figure out. The reason why they got more presents is because we love them more. Good night.
That's a
Well-
whole nother session in itself.
No, but I love the fact that this arrogant little snot-nosed kid, right, asked a really stupid, arrogant question and got a really just,
Deservedly stupid answer.
yes. Well,
Right.
thank you for clarifying that. So
He's like,
that's
let
good.
me just tell you, this
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
the real story.
Yes. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, hope you know whether you remember that story today, right? What it did to you then, or how you took it then, and whether you shifted it all is a whole nother thing. But you remember it today, you know, so it had an impact on you. Okay, Karen.
Thanks for
anything else
sharing.
to add?
I just want to remind our listeners that they too can go and figure out what their saboteurs are by taking this PQ saboteur assessment at www.positiveintelligence.com, and there is a link that will take you to the saboteur assessment. It's no cost, very easy, and very, very informative.
Yes, thanks for that reminder. If you have not taken it, please go do so. It's very helpful. Okay, so Karen, you want to jump into maybe pleaser? Start talking a little bit more about that.
Sure. So, pleaser. Let's see. I think the way that I would frame pleaser up is it's the mindset of wanting to make sure that everyone else is taken very well care of, and or that you yourself are liked well enough. And so there could be a bit of a combination or one or another. But how we see this show up often is being very willing to give. And ironically, what might happen is that there's an unconscious need for something back. And when we're not getting that, we may start to feel a bit resentful and could even then take. And when I say take, I'm going back to just the kind of that little idea of give and take. And so remember those moments, if this is you, you've probably felt the minute that resentment set in, depending on what our other saboteurs might be, right? We then kind of retreat, we pull back, we go into other, either you're not good enough or I'm not good enough, other mindsets, right? So yeah, what are some of the justification lies here, Wendy? This is, pleaser is something that, you and Scott both have this in it's one of your top 3. Mm-hmm. So what's coming up for you as how do you justify this being a pleaser?
Yes, the pleaser can be very loud for me, for sure. So a few of the justification lies might be, I don't do this for myself, right? So no matter what that is, if I'm helping someone or I'm doing, it's like, I'm not doing this for me, I'm doing this for everybody else. The world, honestly, it could be like, no, I got to save the world. Yes, it can be that big. I help others selflessly and don't expect anything in return. That is a justification.
Yes, we'll talk about the irony of that.
Yes, yes. And then the world would be a better place if everyone else did the same. Right?
Gosh, look at the judgment.
Lots of judgment. Lots of judgment.
And unconscious though, right? Because again, when you're positioning that as your self-worth is tied to how everyone else is, how happy everyone else is.
Right. Because the judgment, honestly, again, it is both sides. For me, though, the constant, when my pleaser is really loud, and again, it's tied to other things too, but it's the judgment about me, right? I'm not, because another word, and Scott, you use this, is when our pleaser is really loud, sometimes it can be that we're in rescue mode and we're trying to fix and rescue. And yeah, wow. There's so much that comes up around this, for sure.
Scott, what about you?
Gosh, going back in time, I think my desire to be liked was more important than my desire to be trusted. And then your opinion of me meant more than my own opinion of myself, which really just reared that people pleasing.
Was that when you lost your butt?
That's when I lost my butt.
Okay.
Yep. That's when I lost it. And then it was, I don't know, there was just so many, what a destructive way to live. It was almost.
But so you think about that though. During that period of time in your life, you really couldn't know what you couldn't know that this was destructive, because again, your badge of honor was tied to how well liked you were.
Yeah, and you, honestly, I tell you, this is the sick part of it. It felt so virtuous. Man, it
and
felt
that's the irony,
yeah.
Right? It really is so ironic.
I just want to add, in the positive intelligence of saboteur work, gives some descriptions. And one of the words they use, the very first word when they describe pleaser, is indirectly tries to gain acceptance and affection by helping, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's not again, it's for me and for you too, Scott, right? It's just such a normal operating system that it's not like I'm sitting here thinking, oh, I just want to make sure that I'm right. To gain acceptance, right? I need to make sure I'm doing that. That's not my thought process typically, but What are you processing? I see you thinking, Scott.
I think for me, it was um, thinking about just how wonky that was. And then almost feeling like it was my job to write everyone's script every day. And when they didn't read the script, now it sounds like I'm really beating up on myself, and I'm not, because I get to look up at like how far I've
Mhm.
traveled, because I see people that maybe don't live that way in a pleasing way. And then I look at them and I judge, like what Karen was talking about. Like, you are so selfish and self-centered. You don't care. And that gets wonky.
Mhm.
So I don't know. I'm so grateful that you guys know what you're doing here, because I don't. So I know where I was and I know where I am. And this is just super interesting to me.
It's called conscious choice,
Yes.
right? You can't know what you don't know. And once you have that awareness, you get to choose. So
So if
Wendy,
I like who I am right now, I should stop listening.
well, we'll get into why that restless is here, and the stickler I'm sure we can relate to as well, right? Because I know I certainly
Okay.
can.
Yeah, if the pleaser's quieter, you've got some others that, yeah, we can talk about those too.
Okay.
Yes, but this one for me is really, yeah, it's the last time I took this, it's my second highest, I think. Typically, I would say it shows up as my top, but and just real quick, I just have to, because it's staring me in the face. But like,
It's
the pleaser is, but like some of the thoughts, I'm just looking at, like, to remind myself what are the thoughts that I have, and to be a good person, I should put the needs of others ahead of my own. Like, that is again, it's an operating system. I don't know that I'm regularly thinking that, but that is definitely, and what you just said. Oh, no, the resentment piece. It bothers me when people don't notice or care about what I have done for them. I think that piece that piece is quieted some, but definitely, as I think about my past life, how loud that was too. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
Look at
Karen, yeah,
she's given us that look like,
Yeah.
she's getting ready to do some coaching. I can tell. I
Well,
can see
that's
it
what
in
I
her eyes.
wanted to just. I guess I'm going to put my curiosity hat on here. And for your high pleasers, and this was really kind of fascinating, Wendy. You and I've done this work, but let's see if we can play with Scott and give him back his butt.
That's a theme.
He'll find his butt
Yes.
sometime soon here. In that pleaser, and so the one way of acknowledging and validating its presence, right? As soon as we realize, okay, hey, look, my pleaser's here. It makes sense, right? I know why you're here, but now I want to figure out how to debunk this lie. So this is our number one tool, is the empowering questions. Mm-hmm. So what question would you ask your pleaser to debunk the lie about how well you're liked or how happy everyone else might be?
Yeah, Scott, good question for you, since Karen and I have talked about
it. We'll come back to this, because this is pretty fascinating for Wendy and I. Mm-hmm. But curious here, Scott, if you had that empowering question for your pleaser that you were debunking
today, based on
yeah.
I mean, I think today, like, I'm a friend with myself, so, and I like myself, and your opinion of me it's important, but my own opinion of myself is a lot more important than your opinion of me. And I just had really, really low self-worth. So my self-worth was performance plus your opinion of me. Now my performance one, which is probably the restless one, is still rearing its head, or as you guys said, and I really like that, it's louder. but the opinion of others that's really dampened.
Mm-hmm.
That's come way down. I mean, growing up, I got affirmed when everything was okay. So if
Mm-hmm.
I was a peacemaker and, I did my bed and my brother didn't, so I saw him get in trouble. This is sick, but that felt good, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's getting in trouble. I'm not. So I would just make sure everything was good in my little world.
Harmony. You heard
Harmony.
that word once before, right?
Yeah. But it was super narcissistic.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, oh,
Yeah. So one of the things that I just heard you talk about was the ability to love yourself. And that is magic here, right? So this is how I would frame this up with a client. My question for you as a pleaser would be, what do you need to make yourself whole first before your willingness to even to care for someone else's needs or to care about whatever someone else might think of you, right? What do you need first? So if we really truly look and think that pleaser is sitting with a hole in their heart because they're looking to fill that hole by taking care of someone else to be like, so that they feel worthy and fill that void. If we just shifted that well enough and thought well enough, what do I need first to fill my void, to fill my hole? And it can't be anything or anyone outside of me. The only person that can give that to me is me. You did that, Scott. That's the game changer for you, is you recognize what self-love looked like, being able to think, what do I need first? And that's, Wendy, why you're not feeling as resentful anymore, because you are giving yourself the space and grace of what you need, being able to ask at that point in time when you're starting to feel a bit frazzled why everyone else is, disconnected from you.
that's when you find your butt.
That's exactly right. What you thought was, it's just, you just put your butt back on and you're good.
I found it. I found my butt.
And I love, Karen and I had this conversation a little bit ago, and she asked me that question. Like, for her, that's what came up from her perspective. What would I need? And I said to her, I'm like, I wouldn't even have asked myself that question, right? Like, I'm so focused typically, right, on everyone else. Not that I never ask myself that question, but that's just not a normal thought process for me. So I so appreciate it, especially when I talk about space and grace and the importance of that. It's reminding myself, Wendy, you need to do that for yourself as well. And I think that's why it's so important to me to talk to other people, because I know I need it more.
I want to dial in on this, because
Yeah.
this is really important. So that this is clear. You and I had a conversation about, well, okay, here's the pleaser.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked you, what is your most, what are your empowering questions?
Mm-hmm.
What do you remember what you said?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I said, who am I really trying to please?
Mm-hmm.
I think.
And you had another one.
What am I trying to avoid? No.
Who am I trying to protect?
Who am I trying? Yes. Who
Mm-hmm.
am I trying to protect? Who or what am I trying to protect?
Mm-hmm. And I recognized you're still focused on external of you in both of those empowering questions. And that's when I came back and challenged again, but we can talk about why it comes from my mindset to think about yourself, because I am a stickler, borderline narcissist, if we can throw that word here, Scott. Thank you for the permission. But here we are. It's easy for me to think, well, why wouldn't you need to take care of yourself first? Because that comes from my stickler mindset, right? So it's easy for me to think, well, why would you be thinking about everybody else when you just need to be thinking about yourself? See, I got it figured out. But do I? Right?
No, I'm glad you brought that up, because it is important for us to think about that, which is why this work, I love this work that we're doing and sharing with everyone around right now, specifically the Saboteurs, is because the more that we have that understanding about us, and then the possibility of understanding about other people, we're able to lessen our judgment because we have a better understanding of their perspective. So talking about this and sharing it with each other, right, on this podcast just opens up the opportunity for other people to know it's okay to do the same.
And again, that just reaffirming self-awareness and what that leads to.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, it does start with ourselves.
That's right. Yes. Right. We've talked about this, and, I think reminding everybody, because not that we don't do it ourselves, but it is so easy to come in and hear all these like, yeah, such and such, they're such a pleaser, or they're such a, and while there is a gift and importance to that, eventually, first and foremost, it's, well, what about me? When we can do that work, then the rest will come.
Yes. And so to round off the pleaser here, one of the other things that I've noticed is that it's the word selfish in your mind. Like that it can come across as being selfish for you to take care of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Isn't that how you define selfish?
Mm-hmm.
But let's come back to the irony of what you were talking about before, Scott, how ironic it is that the reason that you're really only looking to take care of everyone else is for yourself, to make you feel worthy in many of those instances, right? And that's just where we break that cycle right away. If we recognize, well, where's my own self-worth first, then your ability to communicate and provide and serve others comes from a very different place.
Well, I think it comes from, 'cause I'll just go back in time, and taking care of myself sounded really selfish.
Exactly.
Because I didn't love myself at all, but I knew how to love you, maybe in a warped kind of way. And then once I found that, there was just a lot of freedom in that,
Mm-hmm.
a bunch. So I like working
Absolutely.
out,
Mm-hmm.
right? I like my maybe my spiritual space where I can
Mm-hmm.
get alone and pray, and I love that. My day doesn't go well when I don't do that, so I find that time where I can get kind of quiet. And I would have never given myself that time
Mm-hmm.
or that space for a lot of different reasons.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think this is an opportunity again, as we talk about, we're gonna jump into, I think maybe we could talk about restless.
Yeah.
But
I
as
don't
you're
want to
hearing
talk about that.
he wants to move on to the next thing.
This is where his butt still is somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where half my butt is, right there.
Right. Yeah. So those of you that are listening to this, again, the opportunity to come back to this and just reflecting, take the time to reflect on, when you think about the pleaser, if that was one that came up for you, what does that mean, right? And how is it showing up for you? So let's dive into restless. This is also really loud for Scott and I.
Mm-hmm. This is your top, right? Both of you. This is your
right
number
now
one.
it is top.
Yeah. And so I see this restless showing up in a couple of different ways, actually. You guys can speak to this. Sometimes I see that this is the distracted one. Or it can be the one who has lots of irons in the fire, constantly stoking. And you just, your self-worth is tied to all that you can have. So yeah, what's coming up? Scott, what about you?
Before we do that, can I just make sure we also talk about,
sure, let's go back into it and define
those,
a little more, and lies and all that.
Yeah.
What are the lies? Tell us. Restless.
Oh, wise one.
So one line that I want to say is, when our restlessness is really loud, we're rarely at peace with the current activity, right? Or are content with it. So it's always like, the next thing. And again, it shows up for different reasons for each of us as far as why we do it. But some of the justification lies, which I definitely, as I'm looking at all of these, they are all true for me right now. Life is too short. Like, we got to get things done, man. Like, life is too short. We got to. And then it must be lived fully. And then I don't want to miss out.
FOMO.
Definitely some FOMO going on there too, I think. Scott, what about you? What's true for you, or what comes up for you when you think of restless and when it shows up for you?
Well, before, if if I didn't have a lot going on, then I had to have like quiet, like things got really quiet. I did not like things quiet. I liked a lot of noise around me. So today's like, it's a lot better, where I'm probably not making as many promises as I used to. And then obviously, in my role, I've transitioned a lot of responsibility. And then stepping away from that has been really good lately. And then not making promises that I probably might break is easier for me today.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I love the action. I mean, I love being where it's noisy and it's fast and it's creative, and then my ego really gets involved there too. Like, I want to be show pony. I want to be on top and all that good stuff.
I love that you bring that up. I'll share a few things that come up for me around this. One, when you're talking about ego, again, right? It shows up for us differently. We either can have a big ego or a small ego, and not that we're always one or the other, but like that's how it can show up for us. And I would say for me, it's the smaller side of the ego from the perspective of, if I don't do, then I'm not going to be enough. And so that lack of confidence and lack of belief in myself, and lack of thinking that I should be, it's okay to stop, is definitely ego, but it's that smaller ego. So I've been working a lot lately. I see how hurtful it is for me to constantly be doing and not allowing myself just to be. And I don't mean never taking action and just sitting around going, oh, well, it'll get taken care of. I just mean, again, going back to that space and grace, the space piece of it. How in the world, if I don't allow myself the space to be able to think long enough and feel long enough, as far as what has come up, or I call them, God downloads, right? Like what am I being called to do to be in alignment with who I am? If I don't stop long enough, I'm not going to be able to, I guess, eventually show up as the best version of myself, right? And Scott, you mentioned the silence, and again, not consciously does this come up for me, but most of us are scared of silence. And I'll speak for myself. When I think of my operating system, just the way that I've been, right? And so I kind of create, I don't even think about it. It's just the way that I show up. Part of the reason I think my restless can be really loud is because if I stop long enough, I don't want to hear my thoughts, and I don't want to feel my feelings.
Mm-hmm.
So if I can just keep on moving, and I envision myself too with 10 arms, like just doing all the things. And both of you know me well enough that you see me in that mode, Scott, people I used to work with at MB used to make fun of me because I would walk so fast in the, hallways and so forth. But that's a coping mechanism too. And so that is the discovery that I've made. And because I'm building my business right now, even more so, if I don't do, I'm not going to be able to keep doing what I love. And that's such a lie, because anyway, I could talk about this all day.
I want to bring into this, how I may have, hopefully our listeners had an opportunity to listen to our episode 10, where I shared the visual of the big bike where everybody's,
yes,
all of the saboteurs are on that big bike that goes from bar to bar, and all 10 of them, the judge, all 9 of these saboteurs, and I'm hogtied in the back, right, being dragged. So you guys in this, what I just heard was, Scott, your stickler is sitting in the back seat or riding shotgun with your restless when you show pony. And Wendy, your avoider is riding shotgun with your restless when you're kind of quiet, when you're like, this is too hard. I don't want to deal with all of the do.
Yes.
And so notice the difference of, Scott, neither one of you want to stop long enough, right, Wendy? Neither one of you want to stop long enough to see what's on the other side of silence or stillness. You're learning to come around, obviously, because you see the benefit of that, because you're taking that a conscious choice, right? And seeing that it's actually a gift there. It doesn't have to be avoided, or it doesn't have to be, it can be a gift in that space of silence. But notice that's your like you say, it's your operating system, right?
Mm-hmm.
I just found that fascinating to observe here.
Are you restless at all, Karen?
No.
No. Boy, that was an automatic.
No.
Yeah, and I think the reason is because I'm a very I have probably learned how to keep it at bay, because I do prefer focus, order, accomplishing, one thing at a time. I'm not great at getting things done to the end. So my hyperachiever is probably the one that shows up there. But I'm a stickler. So if I'm not going to be number one or the best, or we can talk about stickler in a minute, but I can't do 15 things at once good enough.
Mm-hmm.
And Wendy will tell you, this is why we work together really well, is she keeps my guardrails by not needing to constantly be perfect. So for me as a perfectionist, I can get very hung up on staying very, very laser focused, too laser focused on the one thing, right? Where I balance her out sometimes to be like, okay, let's just bring it back down into the one thing, right? Instead of juggling 15 glass balls in the air.
That's a really great way to describe it as I think about our work together, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like with, again, we'll dive into the stickler in a second, but the stickler is more, can like get lost in the weeds with all the different, specifics actually that happened before we started recording, didn't it? Like Kira was like, oh, but this, I'm like,
I need all the
stuff.
That's hyper rational in there too, needing to understand it all. And when you were like, no, I don't want to know any of it. Like, la 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 la.
Like I don't want to right now. But for me, it's like literally not like my brain. I have to be so intentional about stopping and instead of thinking about all the things. It takes a lot of intentionality, which Scott, I'm sure I know you get too, as far as like you be doing something and all of a sudden you're thinking about all these other things. It's like takes a lot to focus in on what you want to be working on.
Yeah, I've probably got like 30-40 minutes of focus time. And then after that, like I got to get up and walk around or do something else. I mean, we must drive Karen up the wall. When you think about that, like we're going to have to she probably needs therapy after one session.
Bring it in. Let's come on. Focus now, people.
She loves us. She loves us so much. And Scott, you just said something that I was thinking about our listeners around.
Oh, here we go. See, look, she's got her thinking going in all these different directions.
Okay, no, it was about this. It was about this. But okay, the restless is kicking in, so maybe we should move on. Oh, I know what I was gonna. This isn't what I was gonna say, but like 10 minutes ago, this is what I was gonna say. What about this, Karen? As far as when we think of, because I do love the idea of giving ourselves an empowering question.
Yeah.
So I'm interested in your perspective because your restless is quiet. If you were coaching me and Scott and me, what's appropriate? Anyway, what would your question be? Can you think of something?
Yeah, I would say, what is it costing you now to have so many irons in the fire? What is it
Mm.
costing you? Do a bit of a cost benefit analysis, perhaps. What would the benefit be of being able just to complete one thing right now?
Mm-hmm. That's always helpful for me. What about you, Scott? Like, does that resonate with you? Or
Oh
how?
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, actually, I was I was with Taylor yesterday, our son, and it was really great to have nothing on the agenda yesterday. And then Lori said, "Hey, do you want to go to Target and get some like finish some Christmas things?" And my answer was, I probably don't, but yeah, I'll go. And it wasn't a burden, wasn't a pain, but to have nothing on the agenda was actually it was really nice and not feel guilty. However, I do have to like get on my spin bike every day, but some days like I can't operate unless I do that.
Mm-hmm.
And then some days I don't even do it that hard, but I just check the box. And then I give myself permission to like to do nothing after that.
Scott, I can so connect with that as a fellow restless person. As far as I don't allow myself to do that very much. I'm working on it. See, working on it. I have to
As
use
if there's a
working instead
day
of
that you're going to
being.
have it.
I'm being on it. I don't know how to say it, but at any rate, when it happens, oh my gosh, it does feel so good. And I can tell that in mind, body, and spirit, I need that downtime and that space. And that is when I am able to give myself grace, is when I have that. So thanks for bringing that up because I can really connect with that too.
And I do think that that's that conscious choice. That's the difference there for you, Scott, yesterday, was being able to say, yeah, I'm coming at conscious choice to be comfortable with nothing on my plate today.
Well, to be completely honest, and it probably sits in the stickler, is, it's 20 degrees out. So I got the leaf blower out. So the leaves are off. I cleaned up, right? There's no dishes in the dishwasher.
Okay, now the truth is coming out.
Yeah. Like, so
There was nothing.
Yeah, I don't know.
Could I lay there and do nothing with a mess off to the side or something?
Okay.
My car was washed,
Uh-huh.
right? So those
Yeah.
things.
Yeah,
Do I
right.
make sense?
But no,
Yeah.
Scott, no, I can connect with that. And I think it's an important point. What is it that we need to do sometimes in order to be able to just be? And I hear you. Like, it is, if I have a day like that, it's getting up in the morning and doing a few things that just makes my mind be at peace. And then I can just be. So I hear you,
I mean, this is so bad, and I know we're going long, but it's stepping in the stickler. I cannot go to bed unless I have clothes the next day laid out. What's going to happen?
That's not stickler. That's just anal.
Yeah. Well, I lost my butt, so
There you go.
yeah.
Oh my gosh. We love you,
funny.
listeners. Thank you for listening to us.
And so I get to say this because
Yeah.
I love it. And my fellow stickler just got very happy hearing that, because I am very much the anal retentive person myself, needing to have things in order. And whenever it's out of order, it's very chaotic and I don't function well. So yeah.
Let's keep going with stickler.
Sure.
Yeah. And then we'll wrap it up. But I think this is a great one to end.
Yeah, like perfectionist, needing to really this has been hard for me. Being number one, being the best, whether I'm competing with myself or anyone else. If I'm not going to be number one at it, then I don't want to do it. Being able to rationalize that, right? My justification lies would be, yeah, I could make up a lot of excuses as to why I wouldn't do certain things. But the other piece to that is it brings about a bit of arrogance to go in and say, oh, I got this, when I don't got this. I don't know jack about this.
I love
But
your vulnerability.
I'm gonna go in and gonna learn it, and especially if it's something that I'm interested in and learning and willing to grow.
I just want to add a comment around that too, is because this is one of those, and I think we talked about a little bit about this last time, that some people, especially if they have that loud stickler, can be saying, well, what are you talking about? Like, shouldn't leaders, we need that to make sure that everything is just right and so forth. And so, yes, and when we talk about stickler as a saboteur, it's when the need for that perfectionism and order is taken too far. And then what it costs those of us that, the stickler, where it may be loud, is coming up. So anyway, I just wanted to bring that up.
No, thank you. I think that's really critical, because there is definitely, how do we leverage, right, some of these saboteurs, the hyperachiever, the controller, those that get shit done kind of thing, right? But here's the point, is that, yeah, there's a point of inflection there, but where it starts to become a bit of a detriment, right? And so for the stickler, we project perfection on others. We have a very, very high expectation of how we show up for ourselves, and that oftentimes is projected on others. And when they do not meet that expectation, we have now set them up for failure. Scott, what is that? I mean, your stickler is your second highest there. So how does that resonate?
Yeah, I mean, my dad even told me that one time. He goes, son, do you know what's worse than somebody who thinks they're perfect? And I was like, no. And he goes, somebody who is. You wear me out. Like, you just exhaust me, and you wear other people out. And that was an approval. So the need to get approval from other people means I had to be in charge, the smartest person in the room, the most going on, accomplish, like number one in sales, like all of those accolades had to be like right in front of me. And he was right. It's probably, I probably gave, my son that curse and daughter that curse. And it's exhausting. It is it is exhausting.
Yeah.
The big problem in that, it's a drug.
Oh, you feed it. Yeah, you can't help. Oh, it's absolutely, it wants to be fed.
I tell you how bad it got. Our kids are in high school. I put tape in the garage. So I don't like junk drawers. I like little, everything organized, like scissors go in one container, pens go in another, binder clips, paper clips. Karen's looking at me like,
yeah, I do. Love it.
Then I put tape on the garage floor, like this is where your cars belong.
Yeah. Like not further back, not further forward. That has to stop right here.
Did not work.
Oh.
Did not work. There's part of me, I'd love to live in a tiny home where everything would just be tiny.
And it's just right there.
It's just right there.
All right there. No, I love both of your, the vulnerability you're sharing and how it shows up for you. Let me share the justification lies, and then you both tell me how these resonate with you. So, one, the lie that, the lie that this is a personal obligation, like that's like your thought process. This is a personal obligation. It's up to me to fix whatever mess I encounter. Perfectionism is good. Plus, it makes me feel better about myself. There's usually a clear right and a clear wrong way to do things. And I know how things should be done and must do the right thing. So what of those, like, how do those resonate with you?
Yeah, I'd say the black and white is that is one of the biggest things for me to, but remember, I'm having a hard time here because my top three are, and had been since really working on this and quieting them, my top three were stickler, hyper rational, controller. And, like, look at the needing to be the number one smartest person in the room and controlling all of it is really, that is toxic, right? Like, nobody wants to play in that space. You can't compete with me. You don't even want to. And I don't make it fun. So I really had to stop. This was the wake up every morning kind of, this was my recovery work, right? I was like, yeah, okay. I get to tell myself every day hello, Karen. Yeah, I am a control freak narcissist, right?
Yeah.
And what do I get to do about that? What do I get to be different today? Right.
Mm-hmm.
So
No,
again, relaxing the controller in me, but still the hyper rational stickler is there.
Yeah.
and I think my question, as not that my stickler isn't ever high at all, but like my question from my perspective would be for both of you. Um, what might you be willing to let go of? And Karen, I think you and I talked about this last time. You're like, heck no, I wouldn't even think of that either. Um, but yeah, and back to your point earlier too, Karen, and what is it costing you by holding on so tightly, to whatever that is? What comes up for you when I ask those questions?
I think one of the biggest realizations through this work with Shirzad, doing the positive intelligence work over the last couple of years, I saw how much it's costing me to need to show up perfectly. Like from an artistic perspective, I really put art aside in a way that I have not been able to reconcile why. Until I realized, well, it's because I'm not showing, I'm not, it's not going to be masterful. So I'm just not willing to do it. But
and
that
she's
it's
a beautiful artist.
well, but it's costing me not to even just go into the space and play where I, you're in that environment of, you have the colored pencil or the paint or whatever, you're in that space of, that's that flow state. That's that highest level of consciousness, right? Where nothing else, time and space don't exist. But I won't even let myself get there because I'm so hyper focused on the outcome. It has to be perfect, that I'm not able to enjoy being anymore.
Yeah.
And so that's a real cost to me.
Yeah. What about you, Scott?
Well, great questions. I think that what is that costing me? And then Karen brought this up too, but what is that costing others? So in your perfectionism, if you're playing and there's nobody else in the room, then you're no fun. And then those of us with maybe some titles or authority, like, then it's even worse because then they have to play with you, but they don't want to play with you. Does that make sense?
Oh, yes. Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So some of this conversation just kind of stings, like, ooh, ouch.
Yeah. And again, it's not from a shaming perspective, right? But when we say these things out loud and really think about it, like all of us do, then we get to ask that question, well, how is it serving me or others or not? And then we get to make the decision that, okay, well, it's not. And so we get to come from that place of conscious choice on how do we want to show up and how, again, like what's the work in quieting them. So I think that's the work for our listeners, as we think about let's go inside, is just being with it.
Acceptance.
Yes, that acceptance. And I think we talked about that last time too. And how is it showing up for you, and what is it costing you? How is it holding you back? And then thinking about the, effect on others as well. Just that, like that's the work. And the rest will come. And I think it's trusting in that. Anything else you would add, Karen or Scott?
I think if I had a definition of each of those, and if you can probably find it on the website, right? That's what they mean. And I took it, and I love what you guys brought up earlier, like a T-chart. So, because there's some good things about being a stickler. There's some positive. Am I making sense? But if you really honestly look at it, it's probably harming you and others a heck of a lot more than it's benefiting you. But looking at the truth in that,
Mhm.
like almost in like in a T chart. So how's this benefiting me and how is this
Mhm.
hurting me and
Mhm.
others?
Mhm.
That's pretty interesting.
Mhm.
And then
And to your point,
if you were really honest, you'd be able to ask some people like close to you, like how annoying is this?
mm, yeah, or how right, how annoying is this? How am I when this shows up, like, what does it look like to you?
Yeah.
What are you experiencing
Yeah. This is
when
what I think I'm doing, but
I'll
is
tell you,
that
my kids
accurate?
can tell you. My kids can tell you very clearly what they think
They
about
can.
that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Mhm.
What do they say?
Um, Mom, I just wanted to vent. You didn't need to come fixing it.
Oh,
Mhm.
yeah. You want my duct tape and super glue? I've got some in my back pocket.
Exactly. That's what
Yeah.
I need. Just
Yeah. So that's the work, right? That's the work is just paying attention. And to Scott's point, I love that. Maybe asking others around you how they experience it. Because sometimes we hear that even more so than we hear ourselves, right? If we hear somebody else and what it does to them or for them or what have you. So with that, we will continue the conversation next time and talking about some of the other saboteurs. And thank you for again just being a part of this community and caring so much about culture and just leadership and how we respond to our circumstances and understanding there's a choice. And with that, we'll see you next time.
Thanks, guys. Have a great day.
you too. Bye.